اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وظل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعزمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء باسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي عدا له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين اللهم اغفر لي اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحتك العصام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تغنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلحمني ذكرك اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضعا متذللا خاشعا أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضعا قانع وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت وفاقته اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وعنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعزم فيما عندك رغبته اللهم عزم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وزهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك اللهم لا أجد لذنوب غافرا ولا لقضائه ساطرا ولا لشيء من العمل القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرعت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك ليمنك علي اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فاضح من البلاء قلت وكم من سار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميلا لست أهلا له نشرت اللهم عزم بلائي وأفرط بسوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وهبسني عن نفعي بعد أعمالي، وخدت الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وعساتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكسرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وقل اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رعوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لغيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ولا يجريت علي نقمة حكم علي حكما اتبعت في هوى نفسي، ولم أهترس فيه من تضيع عدوي، فغرني بما أحوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، وتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة علي فيما جرى علي في قضاءك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاغك، وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا، مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا العاجز مفرا مما كان مني، ولم أفضح أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في ساعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وساقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغضيتي. هبني لابتداء كرمك والصالح في برك بإلهي وسيدي وربي، اعتراك مؤذب بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد ما انتبه عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولحج به لساني من ذكرك، وأعتقده زميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أن تكرم من أن تضي من ربيت، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من عويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري سيدي ولاهي ومولاي، تسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوبنا طرفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر هوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت الأوطان تعبدك طاعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما قد الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، وأنت تعلم ضافعا قليلا من البلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، ولأن ذلك بلاء مكروه قليل مقسون يسير، وبقاه قصير مدته، فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم وقامه وليخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي. فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف ذليل الحقير المسكين المستقيم، يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما من هذا الجوع أبكي العليم العذاب وشدتي أم لطول البلاء مدتي فلئن سيرتني العقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بين أهل بلائك وفرقت بين وبين أحبائك وأوليائك وحبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك وكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على هر نارك فكيف أصبر على النزر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي يفوك فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا أزجن إليك بين أهل هذا ديج العاملين ولا أصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولا أبكين عليك بقاء الفاقدين ولا أنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غياث أعمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين وإله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك إلهي وبحمدك تسمع في صوت عبد مسلما سجن في بمخالفتي وضاقت عذابها بمعصيتي وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرتي وهو يضج إليك ضجيج معمل رحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب هو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تعلمه النار هو يحمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحورقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوتها وترى مكانها أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف تقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربا أم كيف يرجو فضلك في رزقه منها فتتركوه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت بالموحدين من برك وإحسانك وباليقين أقطعوا لو لم حكمت به من تعذيب جاهديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدس تسمعك وأقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تقلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجلى سناك وقلت مبتدعا وتطولت منهم متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستعون إلهي وسيدي وأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها بالقدرية التي هتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أنت حبالي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملت كتمته وأعلنته أخفيته وأظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جماله وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك عافيت وبفضلك سترت أن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزل وإحسان تفزل وبر تنشر أو رزق تبسط أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي وعلاي مالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي عليما بضر بمسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك مامونة وخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من إليه مولي يا من إليه شكوت أهوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جواره واشدد على العظيمة جواره وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في اتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بالسوء فرد ومن كادني فكد واجعلني من أحسان عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وعاطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لحجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن وجابتك وعقلني أسرتي واغفر ضلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك أستجب لدعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك ورجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وتعاته غنى ارحم من راسه ماله الرجاء وسلاه البقاء يا صابغ النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا لمن لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. There's a request for Surah Fatiha for Marhum Sayyid Qasri, father of Brother Abbas Qasri. Assalamu alaikum, Chair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hope you're doing well.
Thank you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الخطبة التاسعة والعشرون, khutbah number 29. We ended in our last session, and as I said in our last session, that I would try to cover some of the history surrounding the individual by the name of Dahhak ibn Qais. Dahhak ibn Qais is, according to Sayyid al-Radi, the main reason for khutbah number 29, in which Imam Ali, once again, as we've had again and again, was complaining about the Kufans and their lack of action and lack of help in regards to fighting Muawiyah and his helpers and his cronies, if you may. And so the Imam, he doesn't mention Dahhak ibn Qais's name, but As-Sayyid al-Radi, the compiler of Nahjul Balagha, he has said that this khutbah was delivered after Dahhak had attacked the caravan of Hujjaj and killed them. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. As I've said again and again in previous khutbahs, like khutbah 27, khutbah 25, we talked about how in the battle, or after the battle of Nahrawan, when the Kufans didn't answer the call of Imam Ali alayhi salam to go and fight Muawiyah, that's where Muawiyah really started putting pressure on the Muslims scattered across the Muslim lands, those who were under the rule of Amirul Mu'minin alayhi salam. And that's something that I've said again and again. Now, when I was reading up on today's topic, I also noticed that this whole idea of Muawiyah putting pressure isn't only for after the Battle of Nahrawan. Even somewhere they had written that it was before Battle of Nahrawan as well. And so, all in all, after the Battle of Siffin and after the Hakamiyya and arbitration took place, the Tahkim, they call it, took place, that is when Muawiyah starts to do what he was doing. Now, we'll get to some of those details as we go through tonight's talk and topic. So, after we finished khutbah number 29, I said that we would talk a little bit about Dahhak ibn Qais. Dahhak, just like the other two individuals that were covered in khutbah 25 and 27, namely Sufyan bin Auf al-Ghamidi and Busr bin Abi Artah, these two individuals were also helpers and aides of Muawiyah in carrying out Muawiyah's plans of putting pressure on the Muslims. In addition to them, you have Dahhak. Now, I've dedicated today's session and probably next week as well to this. Why? Because Dahhak has a very high position compared to the other two that I mentioned. Of course, Busr was also a big problem, Busr bin Abi Artat, and we talked about him before. Sufyan bin Auf, we didn't talk about him too much. The only time we talked about him was when it came to khutbah number 27, if I'm not mistaken. That's the only time you really talk about him. You don't hear about him too much. You hear about Busr a lot, but Dahhak ibn Qais even more. So Dahhak, he is an important figure and individual in that part of history of Islam. So let's talk about him a little bit so we get an idea of who this person was and his involvement and the impact that he had on the Muslim Ummah in the time of Muawiyah and even maybe a little before that. So Dahhak, we don't have too much information about him and his childhood and all of that. They do talk about his dad a little bit, what his job was and so on. That's irrelevant right now to what we're doing. What we want to talk about is him. Now they say some say he was born 1 year before the Prophet passed away, all the way till some saying 7 years before the Prophet passed away. Some even have narrated hadiths from him, from the Prophet. And so they might refer to him as Sahabi. But all in all, he's not really, I don't think that mainstream Islamic thought looks at him as a Sahabi. Um, but nonetheless, as I said, there are some hadiths that he does narrate. And so, but when we look at his report card and what he did in his lifetime, of course, the Shi'i school of thought will be very critical. So let's speak about him. As I said, we don't have too much about him regarding his childhood, all the way up to, let's talk about the time of the Khalifas after the Holy Prophet. And so they'll say that during the time of Abu Bakr, towards the end of his Khilafah, he accompanied Amr bin al-As with 300 men in fighting the Romans. Now, this is not something I noticed anyone bring up, but if you believe that he was born maybe 10 years, 7 years before the Prophet passed away, that means he's like 10 years old now. That means he's like maybe 12 years old now. If you say he's 7 years before the Prophet's death, then if we say that towards the end of Abu Bakr's Khilafah, he went to fight, that means he's like 9 years old, 7 plus around 2, right? So that doesn't really add up. So this idea of him only being 1 year old when the Prophet passed away, according to some, and according to others, 7 years old, doesn't add up with this information. So that when he's born might be something to look into further. But all in all, when you look at some of the history out there, these are the things that they'll list for you regarding the Dhahhak ibn Qais. That during the time of Abu Bakr, he went towards the end of the Khilafah of Abu Bakr, he accompanied Amr bin al-As with 300 men to go fight the Romans. So right from the beginning, he has somewhat a lot to do with those lands towards close to the Byzantine Empire and Sham. Okay, that's where the Romans are. So that's during Abu Bakr's time. Then during Umar ibn al-Khattab's time, the second Khalifa, it says that he was the commander of the left wing of the army of Yazid bin Abi Sufyan. Now, brothers and sisters, you've probably heard that there are two Yazids. One, of course, is the famous Yazid the Mal'un, that was the son of Muawiyah. But then you have another Yazid that's not spoken of too much, and that's Yazid bin Abi Sufyan, the uncle, the paternal uncle of Yazid, that horrible Yazid of Karbala. Okay? Yazid bin Abi Sufyan versus Yazid bin Muawiyah. Yazid bin Abi Sufyan is the brother of Muawiyah, and he is the one who conquered the lands of Sham during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. And so it says here that Dhahhak ibn Qais, he was the commander of the left wing of the army of Yazid bin Abi Sufyan. Now someone might ask, why don't we hear too much about Yazid bin Abi Sufyan? If he is that important, he's the one who conquered those lands, and he's the one who was put there as governor and so on. Why don't we hear about him too much? Because he didn't have that much time in those lands after conquering them. He died maybe not too long after that. And the reason for that, they say, is there was a plague that hit those lands. And so others as well, Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah, for example, also, and others died. And so one after another, they were replaced, but they would die as well. Yeah, so Yazid bin Abi Sufyan is one of those who died in that time. Okay? And so Muawiyah eventually, of course, takes over after Yazid. In that time, it's in those times that the Haq, he is gaining power, he is gaining importance. Here he is the commander of the left wing of the army of Yazid bin Abi Sufyan, the uncle of Yazid, the horrible Mal'un of Karbala, the brother of Muawiyah. Okay. Fighting who? Fighting against the Romans again. Okay. So this is the Haq. He's a commander. And so after it's conquered, he stays in those lands of Sham for the rest of his life. And it's in those places and close to those places where he dies, which we'll get to later as well. During the time of Uthman, there isn't much that is said, once again, about him. All we know is that, or all we can guess, is that if he was this important in conquering those lands, then he's going to probably be there at the service of the Umayyad rulers and governors. Okay, so during Muawiyah's time, or before Muawiyah's time, even after Muawiyah's time, there are rulers and governors that are coming and going under the command of people like Muawiyah. Okay, in one way or another, the Haq, who Amir al-Mu'mineen in that khutbah is complaining about, according to Sayyid al-Radi, the Haq is at their service. Okay, so this is the time of the three Khalifas, brothers and sisters. This is what he's up to, this is what he's doing. So that's about as much as we can talk about. But really, his role in Islam and in the history of Islam is boldened after those three Khalifas. And during the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib's Khilafah alayhi salam, and Muawiyah's rule over the lands of Sham. That's where it really, you find how important this person is, more and more important. So there are a few things that we want to talk about, inshallah, in this session. We want to talk about him before Siffin, the Battle of Siffin, talk about him during the Battle of Siffin, talk about him and the time around the Battle of Nahrawan, and then we want to talk about him after Imam Ali's Shahada, and then his involvement in Yazid's successorship, and after Muawiyah's death also what he did. And then we'll leave the rest for our next session, because the rest after that is his role in the Khilafah and what he was doing during the Khilafah of Muawiyah II. Muawiyah, son of Yazid, son of Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan. Okay, so these are the things I'm hoping we can cover in the time that we have. Before the Battle of Siffin, it says that Muawiyah made him the governor of Harran, which is up there in the northwest, or the northwest of the Muslim empire and the Muslim lands. Okay, closer to Turkey and those places, present-day Turkey maybe. My geography isn't all that, and so, but yeah, it's up there, up to the northwest. So Muawiyah places him there as a governor. So we have to remember that Muawiyah is doing his own thing in the lands of Sham. At the same time, Ali ibn Abi Talib, who is now the fourth Khalifa, he has his own thing that he's doing, and he is in charge of the Muslim lands in his own eyes, at least, including the lands of Sham, right? And so what does he do? He notices that the people of a place called, and the region referred to as Al-Jazira. Al-Jazira in Arabic means island. What's it referring to? Back then, the region that encompassed northwestern Iraq, northeastern Syria, and southeastern Turkey. So it's a region there. It was referred to as Al-Jazira. And you can call it Upper Mesopotamia. You can look this up and you'll find it. So that region, which is very close to where Muawiyah was ruling, they had also given their allegiance and bay'ah to Muawiyah. So two things so far we talked about. The Haq is made governor of Harran. Okay. On the other hand, the people of Al-Jazira have given their bay'ah to Muawiyah. Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, what does he do? He sends Malik al-Ashtar, okay, to go fight these people of Al-Jazira. Fight them. Why? Because how dare you give your bay'ah to Muawiyah when I am the rightfully chosen fourth Khalifa? You're not allowed to do that. So Malik has to go now and fight these people. And when he's going with his army to fight the people of Al-Jazira, Dhahhak ibn Qais, who is not too far away, comes to intercept the army of Malik. And they fight. Eventually they fight in a place close to Harran, where of course Dhahhak was in charge. And so what happens is that they say Malik really crushes and defeats the army of the Haq. Of course, Malik al-Ashtar, we all have heard his stories, right? We hear about him in Siffin, but yeah, before it, after it, also there were a lot of things that he did. All right, so by nightfall, the Haq has been defeated and they retreat. They retreat. What does Muawiyah do? Muawiyah sends Abdul Rahman bin Khalid bin Walid, the son of the great Khalid bin Walid. He sends him now to fight. It's very sad that Khalid bin Walid, who turned Muslim, I think in the 6th year after Hijrah, if I'm not mistaken, alongside Amr bin al-As, um, this person, him, his kids, they're on this side, they're not on the side of Amir al-Mu'minin necessarily. Now, of course, in this time, Khalid bin Walid he's not alive anymore. I think he died also in those conquests against the Romans. After they had conquered them, Khalid died a normal natural death. I'm not sure, but that's what I remember. Maybe it was part of the plague, but that's something I'll have to look up to make sure. If it's anything other than this, I'll mention it later. But anyway, the son of this Khalid bin Walid, Abdul Rahman, is sent by Muawiyah to also fight Malik al-Ashtar, but they also are defeated. They are also defeated by Malik al-Ashtar. All right, so this is him before the Battle of Siffin, the Haq and his responsibilities. Okay, what about the Battle of Siffin itself now? The Battle of Siffin itself goes like this. He was sent by Muawiyah. He was sent by Muawiyah to go and negotiate as part of a delegation to go and negotiate with Ali ibn Abi Talib before the Battle of Siffin. Okay, so now you got Muawiyah here, who is sending a delegation. If you're going to be part of that group that's going to go and negotiate over this very, very important matter, which is the Battle of Siffin, then you have to be a very big and important individual. This shows that the Haq is not a normal person. Okay. All right. So he goes, and of course the negotiations they don't really bear any fruit. If I was Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, I wouldn't let it bear fruits because they want to figure out a way that they can save themselves and they can still have power. Amir al-Mu'minin is not going to settle for that. He won't settle for that. And so Battle of Siffin takes place. During the battle now, if he was the commander of the left wing during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, now he is the commander of all the foot soldiers and the heart of the army. No left wing or right wing here. The main part of the army, he is the commander, the Haq ibn Qais. So now you see why we're dedicating a session or two to him. He is a very important individual in this history. Yes, and so he's the commander there. Now, during the Battle of Siffin, there is aid and help that's coming to Muawiyah's army. Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam sends a group to intercept that aid that is coming to Muawiyah's army. The Haq is a person who goes and intercepts this group of Amir al-Mu'minin that had gone to intercept the aid that was coming. And so there's a clash there. Once again, the Haq is defeated. So this is the second time now the Haq is defeated, or maybe even the third time. So this guy, he keeps losing to Malik al-Ashtar or others that Imam Ali is sending his way. Yes. So this is the Battle of Siffin. And of course, the Battle of Siffin, anyone who was on Muawiyah's side, the Shi'i school of thought, will be very upset with, because many, many lost their lives, and we are sure that they were in the wrong, the ones who fought against Amir al-Mu'minin in the Battle of Siffin. All right, so that's in the battle, during that battle, and his involvement. And of course, if there are more details, I might be skipping them because we just want to get an idea of this person, because the more important stuff is to come, and it really has to do with after the death of Muawiyah, in my opinion. All right, so now the time surrounding the Battle of Nahrawan. So Siffin has ended. The tahkim has taken place, arbitration. Amir al-Mu'mineen represented against his own will by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Muawiyah represented by Amr bin al-As, and the details of this tahkim that we don't want to get into right now takes place. Now, one thing I do want you to remember is this, that Amir al-Mu'mineen, he gave in to the tahkim and arbitration and sent a representative, and they sent a representative. And they agreed that they're going to go by the judgment of these two people. Whatever they judge and come to as a judgment regarding this whole fitna, they call it, between the Muslims, amongst the Muslims, this civil strife that they were struggling with. That whatever they say it goes. Okay? But I'm going to talk about that more once we read what Muawiyah had to say about all that. So the Battle of Nahrawan, before it took place, what's happening? Siffin has ended. Arbitration, like maybe a year later, has taken place. The judgment has been passed now. There are two versions of this story, at least. One version that is, you can say, Wahhabi friendly even, is that they say that Amr bin al-As and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, they came to this conclusion that Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muawiyah will be retaining his power and authority over the lands of Sham, and Ali ibn Abi Talib gets the rest of the Muslim lands, and that's it. No more fighting. That's one judgment, that's one version of the judgment that we find some scholars saying. But there's another version of this story, and you'll find that Shi'i scholars are going to be, and also some Sunni scholars will be also mentioning this version of the story, and that is that no, the judgment went like this, that Amr al-As and Abu Musa Ash'ari, they got together in the masjid, and they wanted to express their judgment and share it with the people, and they said, Amr told Abu Musa, who was the representative of Imam Ali, to go first. And so he goes up the minbar. He says, people, we've come to this conclusion. So originally, apparently, now based on this version, Abu Musa and Amr had come to the conclusion that we are going to strip both of these people, meaning Ali alayhi salam and Muawiyah, of their authority, and we're going to choose another Khalifa. That was the original agreement according to this version of the story. And so when the time comes to make this announcement, Abu Musa goes up by the suggestion of Amr bin al-As. He tells him, you go first, out of respect, quote unquote. So he goes up, he says, I have removed power and authority from the person that I'm representing, which is Ali alayhi salam. I am removing power from him the same way I remove my ring from my hand. So in other words, he has stripped Ali ibn Abi Talib of his khilafah. Now it's Amr bin al-As's turn to go and strip Muawiyah of his power over the lands of Sham. But Amr, they say, went up and he said, in the same way Abu Musa stripped Ali of his power, I am taking this power and this ring and putting it on the hand of Muawiyah. Or giving this power to Muawiyah the same way you can put your ring on your finger. All right, and there was a little bit of a back and forth, and harsh words were exchanged between Abu Musa and Amr bin al-As. He says, you fooled me, you told me to go up first, this was all your plan so that you can take the power from Imam Ali and give it to Muawiyah. And now Amr bin al-As is telling everybody that Muawiyah is the Khalifa of all the Muslims. Okay, so these two versions of the tahkim are very different, of course, you see. But all in all, even if we have the minimalist approach here, and we go with the first version of the story, all in all, the point is that when this verdict is passed on to and communicated to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, what happens is he says, I'm not going to accept this. And now he says, he gets the people, rallies the people, and gathers them to go and fight Muawiyah in Sham. All right, I want you to pay attention to this point. It's an important point here. Let's go back. Battle of Siffin. The Qur'ans are raised to show that these people of Sham also follow the Qur'an. The people of Imam Ali force Imam Ali to stop the battle. They force him to give in to arbitration. He has to forcefully choose Abu Musa al-Ash'ari against his own will to represent him in this arbitration. And Muawiyah chooses Amr bin al-As. 1 year later, or however much later, I think it's around a year later, they get together. This is the conclusion they come to. But then now Ali, who had given into and accepted arbitration, is going against the judgment and saying, let's go fight Muawiyah again. So now here, some of the brothers and sisters might have this question of, hey, what happened? True that Ali is upset about this judgment that they've come to, but didn't he give into this? Didn't he say, I will go by the judgment of these arbiters or not? Did he not say that at the end of the day? And this is something that Muawiyah points out, and we're going to try to answer this, but this is something that Muawiyah points out as well. It says that Muawiyah went to the masjid once he found out. After the arbitration and the judgment was passed, before Nahrawan even took place, when he found out that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam is actually mobilizing troops to go and fight Muawiyah in Sham, when Muawiyah found out about this, they say he went to the masjid and addressed the people. He told the people that Imam Ali has broken his promise of hakamiyah, of tahkim, and that and is not following the judgment of these arbiters. So he said, people, let's come together and we have to get ready to fight. And of course, the people are going to say, how dare Ali break his and go against his word? He gave us his word that he's going to go by their judgment. Now he's going against it. So here there's a question that people sometimes ask, why would Ali ibn Abi Talib do such a thing if he's given his word? The answer is, if you look at the wording of the word that he gave, it wasn't absolute, it was conditional. When you look into history, you'll find that Ali ibn Abi Talib, he says, I will give in to the judgment of these arbiters and the arbitration so long as it is in line with the Quran. Yes, and probably he also added sunnah to that as well. As long as it's in accordance with those, or else if it goes against those, he's not going to be for it. Yeah. And so when these people come back and they have stripped Ali alayhi salam, who was the Khalifatul Muslimin, of all of his authority, or according to that minimalist version of the story, have stripped him of the authority of the lands of Sham, he's going to say, wait a minute, where in the Kitab and where in the Sunnah have these things been mentioned? That you can take Khilafah from a rightly guided, rightly chosen, let's call it Khalifa. Where that you couldn't do this with Uthman or Umar or Abu Bakr. How come you can do that to me? This is so wrong. And so since this judgment is not in accordance with Kitab and Sunnah, it's not binding on me. So that was the condition for Ali ibn Abi Talib to to go by the judgment of the arbitration. Okay. Anyway, that's not gonna fly though for the people of Sham. They're not gonna care. They're gonna come together. They're gonna have an army. And so it's here now that they say Muawiyah, when he knows that this is happening, okay, he wants to cause instability. And that's where he starts sending different groups, different little armies here and there to go attack different parts of Muslim lands and carry out hit and run operations to strike fear in people's hearts and to disunite them and bring instability to these parts of the Muslim lands. Right? And these are, stories that you will find in books like Al-Gharat and so on, and other books of Sirah as well, or history books. So they say one of the first, if not the first group that was sent was under whose command? Under the command of Dahhak ibn Qais. Yeah, so you see, we're bringing it back home again, this whole discussion. We weren't talking about Siffin really. We weren't talking about Muawiyah or Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. We wanted to talk about Dahhak. That was like a little bit of an introduction to get to this part. Okay. So the Haq is one of those ones who goes out to cause this instability. So it says that with 3,000 to 4,000 troops, he goes and he is ordered to make way all the way to Kufa and cause this havoc and line of really fire and to stoke such a fire everywhere across these Muslim lands all the way to Kufa. Okay, so what does he do? It says that he would kill Bedouins. He would kill the Bedouins that he would get his hands on the way. All these Arab Bedouins in the desert. Anyone that he felt is under the authority, under the wilaya, under the bay'ah of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, he would take their life, looting places as he went on. And this is where what Sayyid al-Radi says in the beginning of the khutbah, of khutbah 29, where he says, this is the khutbah that was issued and was delivered when the Haq attacked that caravan of Hujjaj. This is it right here. One of the groups, one of the people that the Haq kills, it says, is a caravan, the caravan of Amr bin Umays ibn Mas'ud, the nephew of Abdullah bin Mas'ud, that grand Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so his nephew. His Hajj caravan, he got a hold of them, and he kills all of them, unfortunately. And this is what the khutbah is talking about. So this is one of those crimes that he committed. This is on one hand. On the other hand, Ali alayhi salam is asking the people to help the people of Kufa. They're not helping out. It's getting worse and worse. Finally, Hujr bin Ali, that famous companion of Imam Ali alayhi salam, he is sent to go and fight the Haq, to pursue them, to intercept them, and to stop them from this chaos they're causing. And so finally, Hujr bin Ali, he runs into them or catches them in a place called Tadmur. I think the English, or how they say it in English, is Palmyra. I might be getting that wrong. And of course, this land got famous in recent years because of the civil war in Syria, where extremists, had taken that part of Syria. So Tadmur, that's where he gets his hands on them. And so they begin, the battle begins between Hujr bin Adi and the Haq ibn Qais, both of them being big companions, one of Muawiyah, the other of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And so after some fighting, there's nightfall, and they say that back then, in those days, they wouldn't fight in the nighttime. Every army would go back and get rest, and the battles would ensue the next day. And so here, the battle ends at nighttime and at nightfall. So when that happens, 19 have been killed from the Haq's army, 2 have been killed from Hujr's army. And so the Haq, again, he's been defeated kind of, and he retreats to Sham. So this is the 3rd or 4th time now that the Haq is losing to the people of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And so he is there. As I said, he was the governor of Harran, and so his jurisdiction is kind of adjacent to the jurisdiction of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the governors that he has in those regions. And so it says that there was a lot of back and forth and fighting between him and Malik al-Ashtar, for example, in those times. Okay, so this is around the time of Nahrawan, before it, after it. This is what's happening with the Haq ibn Qais. Very important things that he did. Important meaning significant. Of course, negatively significant. All right. Now we're talking about after Imam Ali alayhi salam's shahada. Okay. What happens here is that we all know that Imam Hassan, he's not able to take on Muawiyah, because although he wanted to, because he doesn't have the support of the people for such. And so eventually Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he signs that ceasefire with Muawiyah, and Khilafah, you can say, is given or taken by Muawiyah completely now, and he is seen, you can say, as the 5th, or maybe let's say 5th or 6th Khalifa of the Muslims, if you count Imam Hassan's Khilafah alayhi salam. So Muawiyah becomes the undisputed Khalifa of the Muslimin. One of the people that he puts in charge of Kufa is the Haq, but not right after. Before that happens, Muawiyah, they say, from Sham he goes to Kufa in the times that now he is Khalifa. Who does he place instead of himself in Sham, which is very important who you put in your place, right? Who does he put there instead of himself as he's going to Kufa to take care of some business? Now that Ali ibn Abi Talib has passed away, Imam al-Hassan has quote unquote relinquished Khilafah to him, and Imam Hassan is not even in Kufa anymore. He's back in Medina now. What does he do? He puts Dhahak ibn Qais in his place. I'm saying all of this just to show how important Dhahak was, so that later on, when we see how important a role he's playing in the history of Islam, we understand how he got there. This is how he got there. Like, we can tell he was important. That's why he was sent in that delegation to negotiate with Ali alayhi salam in Siffin. Here, Muawiyah puts him in his place when he goes out of Sham for Kufa. And so after that, for a while, maybe 2-3 years or so, give or take, he is made the governor of Kufa himself. And Kufa in that time was super important, by the way. A very, very critical and strategic place and part of the Muslim lands, brothers and sisters. Dhahak is placed there as the governor for a while. Till around maybe 58 after Hijrah. That's about a couple years before Muawiyah maybe dies, something like that. All right, so now we're getting closer and closer to the death of Muawiyah. Okay? Fast forwarding, in these 20 years, Dhahak has been close to Muawiyah, has helped him. Towards the end of Muawiyah's life, according to the history, towards the end, he is made governor of Kufa and then taken again back to Sham. Now the idea of Yazid's successorship, Yazid, the son of Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan, the idea of his successorship to the throne, let's call it, because I mean, even those who like Muawiyah, they will say that yes, he wasn't like the previous 4 Khalifas, he was like a king, he was a good king, they'll say. Us as Shia and other Sunnis as well, they won't believe in such a thing. But yeah, there is a good number of the Sunni school of thought that will describe him like that he was a king and, you know, he got stuff done at the end of the day and he helped the Muslims. And during his time, there were no battles and there was no disunity, quote unquote. Once again, we put all of these in quotation marks. These are things that have to be revisited and reflected upon. But anyway, Yazid's successorship, this idea is brought up, they say, by Mughira bin Shu'bah, which he himself has a long story we don't want to get into. Mughira bin Shu'bah and his role during the times of post-Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Mughira, they say that he convinces Muawiyah that, look, this idea that you have not made public yet, of Yazid's successorship, I think now's the time that you should make it public. And he convinces Muawiyah to announce it to the people, that he has in mind that he wants Yazid to become Khalifa. Now, does this go against the terms of the treaty between Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam and Muawiyah? Now, of course, here Imam al-Hassan is not alive anymore, and he has become Shaheed as well. But Imam Hussein was the one who was after Imam al-Hassan, and he was also supposed to take the Khilafah over after Muawiyah if Imam Hassan is not alive. So there was no mention of Yazid in this peace treaty or in the conditions and terms of that ceasefire. But who cares? I mean, that's not, people don't play that by the rules all the time, right? And so Mughira, he says, look, it's time to make this public. And so Muawiyah says, yeah, let's do it. And so he makes Mughira and Marwan bin al-Hakam. He makes these two like the main guys in charge of getting the people ready and preparing the grounds for Yazid's Khilafah, because Marwan is the governor of Medina, and Mughira is now the governor of Kufa. And so he asks them, okay, you are in very strategic places, and I want you to prepare the people for Yazid's Khilafah. Start getting bay'ah for him. And so in the year 59, which is like maybe 1 year before Muawiyah's death, you have delegations coming from Iraq and other parts of Muslim lands coming to Muawiyah to visit him. And so it says that Muawiyah sees a good opportunity here that he's going to seize to also have the people give their bay'ah, the ones that are coming to him, because these are important people that are coming to him from different parts of Muslim lands, to take bay'ah from them. So he comes up with a plan. According to these historical reports that we have, that he tells the Haq ibn Qais, listen, I'm going to start talking about this issue. Yes, this idea of Yazid's Khilafah to these delegations that are here now. And when I'm done, I want you to get up and show your support and say, we're with you, we agree, this is a good idea. And then he tells others who are also significant figures to stand up after the Haq and show their support now for what the Haq is saying. And in turn, that will be their support for Muawiyah as well for what he's saying. And so it goes as planned. And so what happens is that the people that are there in that gathering and they see that support, eventually they're like, okay, we got to do this too. And so some might have even done it against their will. They didn't want to necessarily, but they just feel like they're outnumbered and they better do something or else they might get in trouble. And so the bay'ah is given to Yazid in that gathering as well. So like all of these different things are happening. But once again, I want to point this out. The Haq is the first one to get up and show his support. Muawiyah puts this responsibility on him, not anyone else. So this shows how close the Haq is to Muawiyah, which is crazy, brothers and sisters. Look at the loyalty, really. These are the ones that really hurt Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam and really put a dent in the work that he was doing, put a wrench in it because of their loyalty to Muawiyah. The Haq, look at how loyal he is. Look at how beloved he is by Muawiyah. Muawiyah is always turning to him for help. I mean, he has others as well. Muawiyah has others as well, like Amr bin al-As and others, but here also you have the Haq. All right, so now let's talk about Muawiyah's death, all right, before I end. Muawiyah, he's on his deathbed. He summons the Haq ibn Qais again. Of all the people that he could have summoned, he summons the Haq ibn Qais and Muslim bin Uqbah. Muslim bin Uqbah, in parentheses, is the same one as that general and commander of the army that Yazid a few years later sends to attack Medina for 3 days and destroys everything. And a lot of blood is shed in Medina in that battle of, or we can't even call it battle, the incident of Harra. Okay, some of you might have heard that. All right. Anyway, Muawiyah summons the Haq of all people, so that once again shows how high he was in the eyes and trusted he was in the eyes of Muawiyah. And Muslim ibn Uqbah. And he tasks them with getting Muawiyah's will to Yazid. Now Yazid was not in Sham. I think he was out of Sham, probably chilling somewhere, doing nothing, doing nothing really important or significant. That's just Yazid and how we know Yazid. And so he tells the Haq, this is what you tell him. Gives him instructions on what to do with the people of Medina, with the people of Kufa, and so on, people of Iraq. And in that time, the Haq, what's his position? He is the head of the police force, you can say, of Sham. Okay, so now Muawiyah eventually dies. Between the time that Muawiyah dies and Yazid comes to power and actually sits on the throne that I explained why I call it a throne, because if you're a king, then that's your throne. In that time, which is a very sensitive time, brothers and sisters, and that can be a turning point lots of times. The transfer of power from one authority to the next, or one president to the next, and so on, is a very important, sensitive, and pivotal time in the history and timeline of a country or a state. Okay, so the Hak is the one that's in charge in that time. Wow. So he's kind of like a temporary Khalifa, you can say, even. And so what does he do? And look at how, like, instead of just pulling off a coup or something, what he does is that he sends for Yazid, like, you better come quick, and you better take bay'ah from everybody, because right now is a very, very sensitive time. But in the meantime, okay, and this is what we'll end with. In the meantime, it's time to bury Muawiyah, of course. Okay, and so they say the Haq takes the kafan, the shroud of Muawiyah, goes to the masjid, climbs the mimbar, and after praising God, delivers a sermon. Now, these are parts of the sermon that I'm going to share with you. I don't think it's all of it, and I didn't get a chance to check if I can find all of it, but these are some points that he has in it. It says that he said that he delivers a eulogy for Muawiyah. He says he was the pillar of the Arab. It was through him that Allah settled the fitna, yeah, and took away the fitna, because what he's trying to say is that before Muawiyah, during the time of Ali, there was all this fighting that was happening, of course. Siffin, Jamal, Nahrawan. But during the time of Muawiyah, 20 years he was in power, none of that happened. He's praising Muawiyah. He's the one who united the Muslims. Wahad al-Muslimin. He's the one who conquered lands, but now he is dead. This is his shroud, this is his kafan. We shall shroud him, we shall bury him, and we will leave him with his actions, and he will be in the barzakh till the day of judgment. It's interesting how these people would speak. When it comes to talking about these things, they're very good at it. But at the same time, they will go and fight Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. It's mind blowing. Don't you get chills just thinking about being the one who fights against the fourth Khalifa or the first Imam, whatever you want to call him? I don't get it, brothers and sisters. I really don't. Okay, so he has Yazid eventually come. Yazid comes, and of course, before Yazid even gets there, they have already prayed. The Haq has already prayed over Muawiyah, and they have buried him. So Yazid wasn't there when Muawiyah was buried. Okay, so that's one chapter, like the whole from Abu Bakr's time all the way till this time. I would say that's one or two chapters of the Haq ibn Qays's lifetime. But moving on now is going to be very important and significant, and that's actually the more important part, and that is the part where it plays a huge role. He plays a huge role in some of the events after Muawiyah, right? But I'm going to leave that for next week. We don't know much about him. They say, once again, we don't know much about him during Yazid's time, what he was doing. Once again, he's probably doing his own thing in Sham, helping out as much as he can. There isn't much mention of him, according to some, because their guess is that Yazid did so many horrible things that overshadows everything else that's happening. So you won't even get a chance to talk about Dahhak ibn Qais. Karbala happened, Harra happened, and the attack on Mecca and the Kaaba happened during the time of Yazid. And so these are three things, and after that Yazid died. And so because of these things, they say it's not clear what his role exactly was during Yazid's time. But it all starts after Yazid dies. And Muawiyah the second, that we call him, comes to power. There's a lot that happens there that I will leave, inshallah, for our next session. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And my salams to everybody. Brother Khurshid, Sister Zainab, Mani Vlogs, Assalamu alaikum to you. Brother Farid, and ASM, salam to you as well. There was a request for Amman Yujib, for Brother Muhammad Jawad Aziz, father of Farhana, Sister Farhana Maklari, and father-in-law of Mahmoud Maklari. He's in the ICU, they're telling me. So if we can recite 5 times Amma Yujib before we end. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. May Allah give health to this brother and all of those who may be ailing, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.